All right, if you need a Bible, please raise your hand. If you don't have one yet, you can follow along. Exodus chapter 20. We will be in Exodus chapter 20. We started Exodus chapter 20 last week. We're right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the Ten Commandments. And it's the funniest thing, when I came last Sunday, I was fully expecting to get to the entire chapter. I thought, just rip through these and just move right along. And I didn't even get halfway through the chapter. I got halfway through the Ten Commandments. You know what I forgot? Hold on. Oh, here we go. There it is. These are the three main divisions in Exodus, in case you weren't here before. There was commandments given, and then the calling for Moses, and then construction warnings. I think we'll get to the rest of those today. We are right in the middle of commandments given. And I did not write anything down here or put anything on this list, because obviously there's a bunch here, but they're all fairly easy to understand. But let me just tell you what we went through so far. Exodus chapter 20, we saw that it was God speaking. Okay, it wasn't Moses coming up with these things on his own, but God speaking. In verse 3, we saw, these are the Ten Commandments, and I'm going to go through the first 5, and I'll go through them quickly again because we already did this last week. But the first one was God only. Only worship God. That's it. So God only. Okay, you shall have no other gods before me. Somebody might say, well, you can have other gods. Just make sure God is first. But that's not the way it works. It's God alone. God only. The second commandment was found in verses 4, 5, and 6, and that was no idols. Do not make any idols. Don't make anything that you are going to use for worship. I explained how when I was younger, I grew up a Catholic in name only. I wasn't really a Catholic looking back. I thought I was a Catholic, but in looking back, but I was involved in that way in idol worship, because there were times when I would pray to a candle or to a statue, and that would be idolatry. So we don't want to be involved in that. The third commandment that we saw beginning in verse 7 was respect God's name. Respect God's name. And I shared with you 3 ways that this commandment is most commonly violated. And these were from Pastor David Guzik. He said the 3 ways that this commandment, respect God's name, is most commonly violated is the first in profanity, using the name of God in blasphemy and cursing. We've all heard that, and that's the first way. Secondly, frivolously, using the name of God in a superficial, stupid way. I like that, in a stupid way. That's a biblical term, stupid. Okay, in a stupid way, but just throwing God's name out there. I shared with you that sometimes I'll have salespeople come to my house to want to sell me new windows or new whatever. And oftentimes they can, when they find out that I work at a church, that I'm a pastor, they oftentimes can kind of jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, really? Because, I go to church too or whatever, and they claim the name of God. And there's always, using the name of God in a superficial, stupid way. And then the third way that this is most commonly violated is in hypocrisy. Claiming the name of God, but acting in a way that disgraces Him. I brought up the example of social media. You can see people's social media, their feed, and they may say God first, or they may have a Bible a verse on there, whatever it might be. But then as you look at their feed, you're thinking, wait a minute, what you're doing, the pictures that you're showing me, and what you say, they don't match. And so hypocrisy, using the name of God hypocritically. The fourth commandment in verse 8 was give God an entire day. It was remember the Sabbath day. And this was a good one. And maybe this is the one that took us a little bit longer to get through. But give God an entire day. He had told his people there at Mount Sinai to remember the Sabbath, remember the seventh day, to use it, you may remember, to use it to be holy, or to keep it holy. It is holy, keep it holy. We went on to talk about it. This is a big deal. This really is a big deal, and I'm going to try to say this real quickly and move on so we can get to the rest of the commandments. But even today, there are still churches that are stuck on that, like Saturday is for worship and Sunday is for worshiping the sun, or it's a pagan day, or whatever their thought is. God is not, you and I need to understand, God is not, because the question may come up, well, why do we meet on Sunday? There are different reasons, but here's what I want you to understand or take away from this. God is not confined to just a day or a specific time that we're to worship him. We come along, New Testament Christians, and we do what the early church did. The early church actually met, if you read through Acts, you'll find that the church was meeting every day. And they were eating together, singing psalms, worshiping, studying together, building one another up. So every day. Now, they were all Jews there, the early church, when the church was just starting. And they would actually go to synagogue or to the temple on Saturday, and they would worship there. But then they would meet throughout the entire week. And that's really what the pattern that we take after. Probably, I'm assuming that none of us in here are Jews. Whenever I ask that, nobody raises their hand. So we're all Gentiles, and what we do is we follow that pattern of we don't necessarily meet every day, you and I. However, we do worship God every day. He is at the center, hopefully, or at least the goal is, to have God at the center of all that we do, everything that we're doing. And I threw out last week, if you're out on the football field, God should be there at the center. God ought not be excluded from your sports. And he ought not be excluded from your band, or he ought not be excluded from your whatever activity it is that you have. God ought to be at the center of all of that. In fact, he ought to be the one that's motivating you to do what it is that you're doing it for his glory. I can remember I got saved when I was 20 years old, and up until that point, it's like elementary, I was a great student. Junior high, and then high school, just I graduated on straight D's. I had an A in one class my senior year. My A was in freshman English. And I was a terrible student. It wasn't only because I was dumb. That had something to do with it. But it was mostly because I was so lazy. I didn't want to do it. And if I could do just enough to get D's, bam, I'm done. I was so excited. I think it was like the last day of school. It might have been the next to last day of school when I found out that I had passed econ and what was the other one that they would make us take? Econ and government, I think it was. Or I think it was government. But I had passed both of them with a D. And you needed those to get out of high school. I was like jumping in the hallways. Oh, I got a D. I passed. So excited. I go start taking classes at junior college, same thing, just so lazy, wasn't doing anything. And in the middle of going to junior college, I got saved, 20 years old. Well, all of a sudden, like I had taken this anthropology class, totally blew it, failed it, went back and took the same class. So the first time I took it, I was not saved. The second time I go back, now I'm saved, and I retake the class. And I got a B in that class. And it was like the first B that I had actually earned in like 6 or 8 years. And that was because something had changed. My motivation going back into that class as a Christian was, I want to glorify God in every way that I can in this class. And I was not outspoken, but what I could do was because I'm motivated, I'm doing this for God's glory now, I got down and started actually studying. It's incredible what happens when you study. You actually pass classes. It's amazing. Put in some study time, you actually get some good grades. I did not know that all those years. And so God motivates all that you and I do, so he's not confined to one day. However, we talked about the importance of giving God time. And if for you it's a Sunday, wonderful. You use that Sunday and you keep it holy. Well, how do you keep it holy? By having him at the center of your day, the things that you do. Spending some time with him that day, like you're doing right now. So really, really good start. And you keep that going throughout the day. And this is actually, I don't know if you knew this or not. I'm sure you knew this. But this is actually the first day of the week. So the Sabbath would be the seventh day. That was yesterday. Today is actually the first day of the week. So maybe it's hey, I'm gonna use the first day of the week to just start it out with God, man, and then that'll kind of just set the pace for the rest of the week. For his people, the Jews, it was all about, listen, the seventh day, you got to make sure you can work the other 6 days, but on the seventh day, don't work, and just keep it holy. I want you to rest. I want you to think about me, meditate on me, God was saying to his people. We read in Colossians 2:16 and 17, so let no one judge you in food or in drink, or regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. So for you and I as New Testament believers, we rest in the completed work of Jesus. He is our Sabbath rest. We know that we do not have to do anything to earn salvation. Jesus already did it. And we receive that gift from him. The fifth commandment in verse 12 is prize your parents. Honor your father and your mother. We talked about the importance of that, of honoring them. Consider all that they've done for you. I have been listening to a podcast. I like to listen to different podcasts, and listened to one on Teddy Roosevelt a while back, and now I'm on to, for some reason, I'm on a U.S. president's kick. So now I'm listening to one about Abraham Lincoln. Extremely interesting, but it seems to me, and I've heard from a couple of different sources, I've not done any extensive study, but it sounds to me like he did not like farm work, he didn't like hard labor, and he had to do a lot of that when he was younger. And his dad would actually hire him out back in those days, rent him out to neighbors to do farm work. And he came to hate it, probably because he had to do it all of the time. But it seems that at some point in his life, at least for a while, that he held, seems like, this is from my own words, it seems like he held a grudge against his dad for that, for hiring him out and making him work. Because back in that time, if the dad would actually receive all of the money from Abraham's work. So Abraham would be out there working, him and his sister, and then the money would all go to his dad. And that seems like it kind of like, that's not fair. And probably some of us are thinking, well, that's not fair. However, his dad did keep him fed. He did keep him housed. He had a place to live. He had a family. He had, the things that he needed. So what would have been good for him, for the president, what was he, the 16th? I think it was the 16th. What would have been good for him was to recognize that I'm giving all my money to my parents, or to my dad. However, my dad is taking care of me. He's paying for things and providing, and he does provide some safety. And you and I want to do the same thing. Think about all that has been given to you, how you're covered by your parents. And let me be the first to say, your parents are not perfect, right? Amen? It's like, yeah, they're not perfect. You're thinking they're not perfect like me. They had a perfect kid, but they're not perfect. Your parents are not perfect, and they're making all kinds of mistakes. When they're grandparents, when you get married and you give them kids and they're grandparents, then they'll be perfect parents. But right now they're not. They're learning. They're not perfect. But the fact is, the truth is, and there may have been, you may be living like in a home with maybe a step parent, step siblings, but they're doing the best that they can. They're figuring this out as they go. And so consider all that they've done for you and prize them. Understand that, man, you know what? Yeah, my parents are not perfect. That is the truth. But, they've done a lot for me, and then appreciate them for that. Verse 13, let's get into the second half of these commandments. If you are taking notes, verse 13 gives us commandment number 6. Do not murder. Okay? Do not murder. This is the idea of, you're planning to murder someone and you take their life. Okay? So I say that because the Bible actually, I don't know if you knew this, we'll get into it, years from now, if you stick around. The Bible actually gives, there's actually a law that if somebody came into your tent, into your dwelling place, and they startled you out of your sleep, and you woke up and you were scared because you didn't know what was going on, and you killed that person, that you would be innocent. It wasn't your fault that they came into your tent and startled you awake like that, and you woke up surprised and scared and killed the person. That is not the same thing as murder. You wouldn't be, watch it, Levi. It was Old Testament, we're New Testament believers, okay? So but you get the idea. There's a difference between that and murder. You shall not murder. Verse 14 gives us our seventh commandment: you shall not commit adultery. This is sex not only outside of marriage, but the idea is that it's I'm sorry, I meant to say this doesn't mean sex before marriage. That would be fornication. This is you are married and you have sex with someone other than your spouse. Do not commit adultery. Okay? Number 8, real easy, you shall not steal. Okay? So do not steal. Real simple. It doesn't belong to you. Do not take it. The 9th commandment is found in verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not lie. So do not think that you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Oh, okay. So I'm not lying about my neighbor, but it is okay to lie about my cousin or to lie about my friend. No. The idea in neighbor is it's just anyone. Do not lie. You shall not bear false witness. Verse 17 gives us number 10. You shall not covet. Do not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor look at this, his male servant. Wow, his servant out there just really knows how to till a field. I really wish that I had that servant, and I wish my neighbor didn't. I'm going to go after it. No. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant. Man, look at how she made, you go over for dinner. Wow, his servant, she really knows how to make tortillas, man. Really wish I had that servant. She made me tortillas, whatever I wanted. No. You leave her alone. She's not yours. He's not yours. They're not yours to desire. And the idea of coveting is that you want them, and not only do you want them, but you want this other person not to have them. You want to take what they have. Nor his ox. Don't even covet his ox. Dude, that's a really nice ox. Look at his hooves. Look at his horns. Wow, it's really good. It's not way better than my ox. Don't do that. Nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. I like how he clears that up at the end. It's like, don't covet this. And some of us are looking at that like, oh, okay. It doesn't say not to covet his house, or a swimming pool or whatever. No, just don't. Nor anything that is your neighbor's. Don't desire it. Don't go after it. Don't wish that it was yours and not theirs. Do not covet. I want you to notice some of these things. What do we have so far? God only, no idols. Okay, respect God's name. Give God an entire day. Prize your parents. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not covet. At the end there, do not covet. It's a sin of the heart. It's like a secret sin. It's there, you're coveting it. No one can see that unless you share that with them, but no one can see that. And this is the one, and I think I was talking with Jacob about this, that this is the one that tripped the Apostle Paul up. He basically was saying, he says, I was able, I was keeping the 10 Commandments, man. I was just on it. 1, check. 2, check. All the way down, 8, 9, there, check, got it. And then he got to the 10th, And this is where he realized how guilty he was, because this sin, do not covet, was a sin of the heart, a desire. It was a desire. And he realized that he was guilty of coveting. And if you're guilty of one, then this is the law. You break the law, you're a lawbreaker. You may keep all of the rest, but you break one, you've broken the law. These 10 commandments, now there's a couple of things going on here. These 10 commandments were designed for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they're not just suggestions, but they are the Jewish people, God's people, were expected to hold to these things. These were made to govern their lives. And not just to lock them down and make them miserable, like, oh man, what a party pooper, I can't even covet. But the idea was that, and I shared this with you last week, that these were like the yellow, when you leave the parking lot today, these were like the lines on the street. Tells you in which direction to go. Tells you what direction not to go. So they are these guidelines, these rules, these commandments that were given to direct and to guide the lives of these Jews. That as long as they did this, as long as they did these things, there would be no head-on collisions. But when they decided to go their own way, when they decided to cross over the yellow line, then came disaster. But there's another reason why these things were written, why the law was written. And we've been learning about this in Romans on Wednesday nights. That the law was given not only to govern, but also, big reason for it, was to show us our need for God. And specifically for Jesus, the Savior. To show us that we sin, that we mess up. That's part of the reason for street lights, red lights. For the yellow lines, for the dotted and all the different things. If you go through a red light and there's a police officer there and you get pulled over, that red light is an indicator to you that you broke the law. You can't deny that. You broke the law. Police officer pulls you over. Hey, do you know what you did back there? Yeah, I know exactly what I did. Went through a red light. Broke the law. I deserve a ticket. I had a pastor friend that one time he got pulled over by a police officer. He's a youth pastor already, and he gets pulled over by this police officer. And the police officer says, "Hey, listen, you did two things. You broke the law. You were speeding, and you did this other thing." And the police officer said, "I am going to give you a break. You pick just one of those. I'll give you a ticket for one of them. Which one do you want?" The youth pastor, being this, this righteous guy, I guess he broke the law, so he's not so righteous, but he tells the police officer, "Well, it's your job. I broke the law. I broke two laws. It's your job to give me a ticket for both." Police officer says, "Yeah, but I'm giving you a break. Just pick one." My friend says, "No, I'm not doing that. You need to give me a ticket for both." Police officer says, "No, you're going to pick one, and I'm going to give you a ticket for one, so just pick one, and let's get out of here." He says, "No, that's not right. It's your job. You got to uphold the law. Give me a ticket for both, or just give me a ticket for both." Police officer got so frustrated with him, he said, "Forget it. I'm not giving you a ticket. Get out of here." I said, "What'd you do? Did you stay there and argue and get your ticket?" He's like, "No, I got in my truck. I took off. All right, I'll get out of here." You break the law, you go through a red light. It's an indicator. It's made to stop you, but also when you go through it, now you know, oh, I broke the law. And for us, you and I, the law, what it does is it shows us our need for a Savior. The law is a good thing. Sometimes people think, well, that was Old Testament, and that was for the Jews, and it's not really for us. No, it is. You see, if nothing else, it shows us the heart of God. You and I want to see that as we're reading through the Word. We want to see whenever God opens His chest in a manner of speaking. When He opens His chest and shows you His heart, that's what He's done here. These are the things that are important to Him. And we want to recognize that and go, hey, these are the things that God likes and the things that God loves, and these are the things that God hates. And so let's pay attention to that and recognize God's heart in all of this. And don't just go, well, it's just the Ten Commandments. That's old school, whatever. It's not for me. We're New Testament believers, and blow it off. Let's move on to our second main division. We've seen the commandments given. Let's move on here, and there it is, calling for Moses. Let's see what happens here. Verse 18. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings. Don't forget, Moses is up on Mount Sinai, and he's meeting with God. If you were here a couple of weeks ago, you heard, God was telling Moses, really, listen, do not let the people come up the mountain. In fact, do not even let them touch it. Remember, he said, if they come near the mountain, if they touch the mountain, if their donkey touches the mountain, then that person must be eliminated. They must be killed. And he actually said that you must stone them or shoot them with an arrow. You go, what? What God was saying is, listen, if somebody decides to break the barrier and touch the mountain, I told them not to touch it, and they decide to break the barrier and touch the mountain, do not even touch that person. From a distance, kill them, either with rocks or with a bow and arrow. Do not even touch that person. They have violated the rules. They've violated it, and they are sinful, and do not have anything to do with them. So this is a serious deal here, and that's what God was attempting to make known to them. So as Moses is up there, he's meeting with God. All of the people are down at the bottom of Mount Sinai, and they're looking up, and the mountain is covered in thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Nobody's trying to get close. They're all standing afar off. Then they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. Here's our subpoint in this. They're calling for Moses because they are fearful. As they look up, they see all of these terrifying signs, all of this stuff going on, and they told Moses, you speak with us and we'll listen. We'll listen, Moses, please. But let not God speak with us lest we die. Please do not allow God to speak to us, Moses. Please, you be the middle person. We don't want to hear from God. Now keep in mind that though these people are terrified of the way that God is appearing on this mountain, remember that God does not always appear that way. In fact, it was rare. Oftentimes, and he had done this with Moses, he met with Abraham, he met with others, Jacob, and he met in a much different way. Oftentimes, it was like a friend speaking to a friend. With Jacob, he spoke to him. Remember, they wrestled. So he spoke in many different ways. So this is not the norm. This is not this is not the way it is. It's not like going in and I want to go see the Wizard of Oz, and it's just always lightnings and thunderings and all of that. This was something that God was doing in order to establish some leadership and some rules with these people that have just come out of slavery, out of Egypt. And so he wants to establish this relationship. And so it says in verse 20, and Moses said to the people, do not fear. Yeah, easy for you to say, Moses. For God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. So pay attention. God's trying to teach you something. Verse 21, so the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Incredible. God was in the darkness. I like that. A light fulfills its greatest purpose in the dark. A light is of no use in the light. God appears in the dark. Now, he could have appeared, and he did, lots of different ways that God appeared. But in this instance, he appears in the darkness. I love this, again, because it's showing us, as we're working our way through the Bible, showing us all the different ways that God appeared to people and how to relate it to different people. With Moses, it was in the burning bush. With Abraham, we're not even really sure what happened in Genesis 12. We just know that God showed up and began speaking to him. And so all these different ways that God reveals himself. Now, verse 22 gives us our third and final main division. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven." And he reminds them here in verse 23, "You shall not make anything to be with me, gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for yourself." So there's something going on here with this commandment against idols, because God reiterates it. He says it again. He gives these construction warnings. The first one is against idols. Do not construct idols. Do not make anything to be with me. Gods of silver or gods of gold you shall not make for yourselves. Now, does anyone know? You know the story? Does anyone know the story and know, as God is giving this commandment, what are the people going to do in a short time down at the bottom of the mountain? Does anybody know? What are they going to do?
The exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly what God is telling Moses. The people are going to, they're going to hook up with Aaron, and they are going to make a god for themselves. So as God is laying out these laws, they're breaking them. I mean, that's what we do, right? Parents give you some rules, you immediately break the rules, right? I told you not to do X, Y, Z. Rules were made to be broken.
Well, I did X, Y, Z.
What's that?
Well, I did X, Y, Z. That's why I get in trouble.
Yeah. Yep. And I know the rules are clear for you, because I know the rules too. Shh. You shall not make anything to be with me. Don't make any idols. It's a huge deal. Now, let me remind you real quickly. Why is it such a big deal, these idols? Where did the people come from before all of this? Does anybody remember where they came from? Egypt. Yes, Russell. Came from Egypt. In Egypt, there were lots of, help me out. Yes, idols. They are going to the promised land, which is Canaan. Now, God's got a plan. They're supposed to go there and just wipe everybody out, wipe the slate clean, and start over. However, they will not do that completely. But in Canaan, there are Canaanites, there are all sorts of other ites. You know what else is in Canaan? Anybody want to take a wild guess? Idolatry. Idols. And so God is telling them, let go of the past and prepare yourselves for the future. So God knows what he's talking about. Maybe to them they're thinking, why do you keep telling us about idols? Like, we don't even have any idols. But he knew the heart of these people. Now, in verse 24 down to the end, verse 26, here's the last thing that we see, some construction warnings concerning altars. So he gives a construction warning against constructing idols. Now, finally, he gives this warning concerning constructing altars. Let's look at it. Verse 24. An altar of earth you shall make for me. What is earth? Does anybody know what he means by earth? What do you think, Levi? Rock. Yeah. Rock, maybe dirt, earth. An altar of earth you shall make for me. Now, right away, let me ask you a question. Do you think that if you were making something from God or for God, you were going to make something to present to him? Christmas is coming up in just a few days. You excited? So am I. I got some good gifts to give away. I'm excited. If you were going to give a present to God, I mean, you have an idea of what that might look like. You know, you say, oh man, I'm going to, really gather up some cool stuff. And maybe it's like, well, I don't have a job, so what can I give? Well, I've got this box of shells, this jar of shells from the beach, man, my favorite shells. It's like, oh, I'm going to give those to God. But then all of a sudden it hits you, wait a minute. He made all of these things. Okay, now I got to find something else. You would want to give him the very best gift that you could. The greatest Christmas sweater you could find, you want to give that to God. The best Christmas tie, you want to give that to him. You would want to give him the very best thing that you could find or that you could get your hands on. But here in verse 24 is where I told you, reminded you, listen, pay attention and see God's heart. Look at verse 24. An altar of earth you shall make for me. He wanted not a fancy altar, but a plain altar. And he says in verse 24, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. Now listen, Fusion students, what an encouragement. That God is not looking for the lavish, the fancy, the expensive. But God is satisfied with the plain, the normal looking. I mean, how many of you, how many of us oftentimes feel like, you know what, I'm too plain. I never get noticed. I'm not a popular person. I just can't ever seem to get the right, look going or the right outfits, or I just don't ever really seem to have the right equipment. And I just always kind of seem like to be just like, I'm not noticed, in a crowd. I'm just kind of just basic and I'm just there. And yet we see the heart of God when it comes to the altar. He says, make it an altar of earth and use that. I don't want anything fancy. He's going to go on to explain some more things here as it pertains to this subject. But I don't want anything fancy. I don't want anything that's going to take the attention away from me, is what he's telling those people. I don't want you to worship the altar. I want you to worship at the altar. I don't want you to take all of the attention. Same thing for you and I. Some of us may have a desire to be flashy or to have the certain look or to be a certain way. But we must be careful that we are not, in so doing, taking the attention away from God. But you and I ought to, as God is, to be satisfied with the plain things. To be satisfied that God is glorified and I am not. You and I don't need to chase after all of the attention. We need to be satisfied in the fact that God is getting the attention. An altar of earth you shall make for me. Listen, God loves you. You hear that all the time. God likes you. You know how there are some people that you love, like family members? And you know how there are some of those family members that you love that you are glad you only see them at Christmas time? Because you really don't like them, you know what I mean? Hopefully those same people don't live with you, but you know how there's some people that you might love, but you don't necessarily like. It's hard for you to, it's like, oh, okay, God, just, sometimes you gotta, you pull up to the party and you're just like, okay, hold on. Just, like, what are you doing? Putting on the full armor of God. Why? Because, Aunt Judy's in there or whatever, and it's like I just need to spiritually prepare. Lord, have mercy on me. Just you gotta kind of gear up. An altar of earth you shall make for me. I don't remember where I was going with that story. Sorry, I'm lost. Anyways, an altar of earth. Keep the main focus. God is the main focus. Verse 25, he goes on to give them some more. And if you make an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. Does anybody know what hewn stone is? Is what?
I thought it was dressed.
Dressed stone? Okay. Everybody know what that means?
I'm assuming decorated or fancy?
Okay, yeah. It's a hewn stone would be stone that is like, hand carved. It's hand chiseled and all of that. So he says, and if you're going to use rock, don't take rock and form it and fashion it into something. Well, we can make something way better for God than this piece of junk. Let me go get my tools, and you make something else. He says, if you make an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. For if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it. You've dirtied it. You've made it filthy. Don't be concerned with fancy, with attention getting. But keep it plain. Make sure that God gets all of the attention. God likes you the way you are. That was the point of my story a moment ago. He loves you and he likes you. And yes, he's changing you, making you different. He's concerned with the point of it all. What's the matter at hand? Make it out of earth. Make it out of plain stone, rough stone. Don't touch it. Don't use a tool on it. If you do that, you've profaned it. You've dirtied it. And finally, in verse 26, nor shall you go up by steps to my altar. Don't build steps. Don't make some big fancy altar where you've got to climb these steps. Reminds me of my ancestors and the pyramids and temples that they would build in order to sacrifice humans. And all the steps, you've seen them, some of the Aztec and Mayan pyramids, and all these steps, and it's climbing. It's this idea of, man, I'm going up, and I'm going to reach, and I'm doing it, and I'm making my own way. And these beautiful, elaborate places of worship. God says, do not do that. I love this, where God was going to meet with them just at their own level, on just level ground. Dirt, rough stone. Don't make it something elaborate that's going to take away the attention. Make sure that the attention is on me. What matters is the sacrifice. The peace offerings, the burnt offerings, the sheep, the oxen, and who it's being sacrificed to. Nor shall you go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it. What? He says, I don't want you going up on these steps, and then everybody's watching you, and not that you're going up there naked, but just they might see your skin. They might see parts of your body as you're going up the steps. Don't do that. I don't want you to distract from anyone. Like, oh, there goes the priest. Man, he's got some really nice calves. Can you imagine the priest going up like, check these babies out, but you don't do that. Don't take any attention away from God. Man, what a life transforming thing that would be if you and I were consumed with giving God the glory and the attention and not getting it. Satisfied with the plain and not the flashy. Satisfied to be overlooked as long as people saw God. Let's let that be what drives us. Let's let that be what motivates us. Let's let that be the point of our lives as you and I near the end of a nasty year. Although I think even in this nasty year, there's been lots of growth. But as you leave this year behind and move into the next year, let's make that one of our goals. It's okay to, make the goal, I want bigger biceps or whatever goals you have. But let it be motivated by, I want God to be glorified more in my life this year than he was last year. I want him to get the attention.